There's one problem facing America that politicians actually agree on.
We're $1 trillion or $2 trillion short in terms of necessary infrastructure repair.
We have airports that are obsolete. We have the worst transportation system and train system.
We are living off the investments and the hard work of our parents and our grandparents.
And when that infrastructure fails, the costs can be staggering.
35W Bridge is in the water.
A levee break the size of a football field is slowly flooding New Orleans.
And there's the cost of delay.
You're not attracting jobs, you're not getting to school, you're to the movies, to the restaurant.
Once we were the model for the world. Now we're falling well behind.
I mean, have you ever heard of a levee breaking in the Netherlands? So I wanted to know why it keeps happening here, or why our commutes take so long, or why my flight's always delayed, or why it takes a freight train a day to move across Chicago.
We have a fight on our hands. We're competing with other countries that are taking our business.
How did we become the United States of Disrepair? And can we fix it? California's Central Valley. It's hot. It's dry. So why are we in Sacramento talking about floods? Well, 500,000 people live here, at the intersection of two rivers. And the city is 7 rainy days away from ruin.
What would the worst case scenario look like for the urban area of Sacramento?
We could be having casualties equivalent to that in New Orleans. It could be 1,000 to 5,000 lives lost. The damage totals, economic losses be catastrophic, in the billions of dollars.
Civil engineer Mike Mierswa is among many national experts who say Sacramento could be the next Katrina if its flood protection fails. The main thing protecting the city? These levees. You might not even realize that's what you're looking at right now. Some of them are in great shape, but not all.
The linchpin, and that's what makes them so important.
Most of us don't think about water danger in our daily lives, but chances are you live in a county protected by a levee. 156 million Americans do, and those levees could be the only thing between you and a wall of water. Climate change and rising sea levels have brought a wave of destruction, and our water protection systems aren't always up to the task.
In the case of a flood event, this could be one of the danger areas for all of Sacramento. As the Sacramento River winds its way around the city, it pushes right up against this aging levee here. And this levee is protecting a huge residential area called the Pocket.
By building the levee and reducing the risk to what's out there, now other people will move into that levee protected area. And so the risk in that area actually increases.
To help combat the problem, Mierswa wants to shore up the Sacramento Weir, a barrier intended to divert and slow water flow.
When the water gets high enough on the river, it'll begin to overtop the weir and move down a bypass system. So it's saving 500,000 people's lives by allowing the levees to function better.
But it's a 100-year-old system.
It's a 100-year-old system, that's right. Definitely in need of a rehabilitation.
Which brings us to the next problem. California's levee maintenance only gets $30 million of funding per year.
If we want to maintain the system to what it is designed to be at, it would take $130 million per year for just 1,600 miles of levees.
So 4 times more than the budget allocation is currently.
That's right.
America used to invest in itself. The Tennessee Valley Authority of the 1930s tamed our rivers. The Transcontinental Railroad of the 1800s and the interstate system of the 1950s connected the nation and unleashed our economy's true potential. Now, not so much.
Europe, Asia, everybody's in 5-10% of their GDP they're investing in infrastructure. We're at less than 2%.
And politicians across the spectrum agree on its importance.
We need to invest more in infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our ports, our airports, our water systems.
We will build the greatest infrastructure on the planet Earth, the roads and railways and airports of tomorrow.
Politicians and voters alike used to agree on the necessity of funding these types of projects. So what changed? President Obama says it comes down to philosophical differences between the parties.
Because of an ideology that says government spending is necessarily bad. That mindset has led to us not investing in those things that we have to do together.
Harvard Business School's Rosabeth Moss Kanter, who's become a leading voice on this topic, says these divisions have become systemic.
The people pushing are in silos. Rail pushes for rail, air has a whole agenda, the auto manufacturers have their agenda. We don't always put that together. And until we have national leadership that understands how to bring them together, convene one grand conversation, we're not going to really make progress.
So we've seen why water protection fails in this country. It's often overlooked, underfunded, and misunderstood. But why are my flights delayed, my commute so long, or are trains so slow? Well, it turns out Chicago answers all three, so I set out for the Windy City. It didn't take long to get stuck.
We are currently driving in a so-called express lane on the I-90-94, and we are moving at 0 miles an hour now. We are stopped in an express lane, which is somewhat par for the course for Chicago, because this highway right here is the most congested highway in America.
We actually spend way more per year on highways than any other form of infrastructure investment, but our roads are still in a consistent state of disrepair.
The state of roads in Illinois right now is projected to get down to a 60% state of good repair in the next 5 years. So 60% of the roads will be in good state of good repair. That means 40% won't. That's an unacceptable statistic.
That story repeats itself across the country. 1/3 of America's major roads are in poor or mediocre condition. Somewhat counterintuitively, we don't necessarily need to build more roads. Increasing capacity often leads to greater congestion, not less. It's often the least sexy stuff that matters most.
There's potholes, there's congestion. So that really becomes our first and foremost primary mission critical, is to fix what we have. If you are doing maintenance correctly, nobody notices. That's not something that politicians like. They like to get noticed.
That's the case with our bridges too. 1 in 9 of them are structurally deficient, meaning they require significant maintenance, rehabilitation, or replacement. Congested, crumbling roads and bridges hit your wallet at the pump, at the mechanic, and at the store too. Trucks move 2/3 of our freight in this country, and when they can't move around, costs get passed on to the consumer.
Everything is dependent upon this infrastructure that operates in the background when it works well, but when it starts to fail, people will notice that.
So if we spend more on highways than anything else, and it's still nowhere near enough to even maintain what we have, imagine how far behind we are elsewhere. In this country, more people travel by air than anywhere else, by far. I'm one of them. I've flown dozens of times in the last couple of years, and my flights are delayed at least half the time. Why? Because many of our airports, most built decades ago, operate beyond their design capacity.
Many experts estimate that the United States economy loses somewhere between $22 and $30 billion a year in lost economic output due to flight delays and cancellations. And one of the biggest culprits is this airport right here, Chicago O'Hare International. Every time you come through this airport, on average, you're adding 34 minutes of travel time round trip.
And O'Hare isn't even the biggest offender. All 3 New York airports are worse, and LaGuardia takes the cake, adding an average of 56 minutes to every round trip. On the other side of the world, this is what airport investments look like. Singapore's Changi Airport is considered the best in the world. Look at its spacious terminals, indoor rainforest, art installations, smooth operation. Tokyo's Haneda is a gleaming cathedral, and its on-time departures are tops in the world, greater than 90%. So what's standing between us and this? For one, we need to replace the FAA's radar-based flight systems with satellites, faster, safer routing, and decreased gaps between plane takeoffs and landings. That's in the works now, but only if Congress funds, not cuts, the FAA's budget. Changi and Haneda also benefit from coordinated federal and private funding. But here, airports are owned and operated by a hodgepodge of local, county, and state groups, and our airports can't raise passenger fees for improvements above a meager federal cap set more than a decade ago. Another reason why U.S. airports are overburdened? A lack of comparable options.
If we did more to have rail be a great alternative, the way it is in Europe or the way it is in Japan, then not as many people would be flying.
We do have high-speed rail in this country. The fastest is the Acela Express in the Northeast Corridor. Due to track issues, it can only reach a top speed of 150 miles an hour in 2 short locations along its route. Meanwhile, maglev trains in Japan and China reach top speeds in excess of 250 miles an hour. This is a major reason why we can't achieve that here. Look at these 6 lines of track, running directly across one another, shared by freight, commuter, and Amtrak alike. It's the infamous 75th Street corridor.
It really is the Gordian knot in Chicago that needs to be untangled. It would be like 2 major interstates meeting each other at a 4-way stop sign. It really is impactful on the entire nation in terms of moving traffic through.
When various lines share track, as is true on the Acela in the Northeast, it slows everyone to a standstill. This matters because 40% of ton miles traveled by freight in this country goes by rail. That's your food, your cars, your packages, and 1/3 of it goes through Chicago.
There's no other mode of transportation where 1/3 of something goes anywhere. You can do everything right everywhere else, from sea to shining sea on our network, and Chicago is the goal line, and you can't fumble on the goal line.
In many cases, it takes 48 hours to move rail freight from LA to Chicago, and a day just to move it across the city. 6 of the 7 major railroads in this country connect in the city, the only place that happens. So to start untangling this mess, the rail companies, working with Amtrak, the City of Chicago, the State of Illinois, and the Department of Transportation, want to build a flyover that would separate the north-south and east-west tracks from one another.
We get support letters from Houston, Seattle, Tacoma. It's not a local neighborhood job. It's one of global significance.
To avoid getting stuck in transit, I order a lot of things online. I'm sure many of you do too. And if you shipped it by UPS, it's likely your package went through this rail yard, CSX's Bedford Park. It's the busiest yard in the city, and it underscores how many big, complex things have to go right before your orders get to you. What are we looking at right here? What's going on here?
Right now they are lining up our train going to Kearney, New Jersey. This train will go out about 10,000 feet tonight, and it'll carry close to 300 boxes on this train.
The yard measures how busy it is by lifts, loading a container onto or taking a container off a train.
And how many lifts will this facility do this year?
I'm thinking we're going to do close to 950,000.
950,000 container lifts in this one yard. So when freight trains are held up at intersections like the 75th Street corridor, huge operations like this can't run smoothly. For all these issues, it all comes down to a collective failure of leadership. If public and private interests, politicians and voters can unite to fix our crumbling infrastructure, the payoffs could be huge, from better global competitiveness to world-class travel experiences. What do you see as the future vision of what the infrastructure system in this country is going to look like in 20, 30, 40 years from now?
I think it'll be things that use technology, are much more integrated and multimodal, where you'll be able to connect from one form to another fairly seamlessly. We'll have walkable cities that feel human, while all this technology makes it easier for us.
The rise of technology and big data are breaking through new frontiers that we never even dreamed possible 10 years ago. But those will mean nothing if the fundamental system is not maintained and repaired.
This is a connected system, and we should see it that way, and we should think about leading our leaders to do more about it. I really hope that the millennial generation will take this on and start imagining the way things could be and then push.